again, because of the Ashton Kutcher movie and because of people's preconceptions, the first thing they'll say is, oh, you must be an excellent swimmer. Or, if we were swimming, I know I'll be saved. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you what, dude, I'm going to be able to save myself. And I did the life-saving training and I passed it all. I said, but it's a lot simpler in a pool, pulling a brick up from the bottom. I said, you expect me to save you? It better be my best day swimming.
Welcome, everyone, to the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, the Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We are a small nonprofit based in Pittsburgh, PA. Our mission is to create communities of listening around veterans to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. This program, the Scuttlebutt, it was created to highlight that educational element of our mission by discussing recent military headlines and topics to help bridge the military-civilian divide. Super excited that we are reaching the end of our series on each of the branches of the military, and even more excited that we're going to be talking about the Coast Guard today. I've learned so much about it, even just before we started recording. So joining us are two Coast Guard one Coast Guard veteran and one Coast Guard active current. I'll jump to Jacob first. And Jacob, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is BM1 Jacob Niehaus. I'm currently serving as the Executive Petty Officer on board the Coast Guard Cutter Osage in Swickley. I've been here for about 6 months. Prior to this, I was on the Coast Guard Cutter Wrangel out of Bahrain. Then I did AIDS Navigation Team Corpus Christi and the Coast Guard Cutter Laguerre out of Portsmouth, Virginia.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jacob. And Mike, you're a Coast Guard veteran. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm a retired commander, Mike Evanish. I served between 1991 and 2014. My first mission area was marine environmental response and protection. So I served in the Great Lakes and in Virginia in a capacity related to oil spill cleanup, chemical response type stuff. Then I moved on to, right after 9/11, to port security and anti-terrorism type missions. And I did 3 successive tours related to that mission area, one in Port Arthur, Texas, near the Houston, Texas area, one in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then a little bit of time back in Corpus Christi as well. And I think the BM1 said he served in Corpus. So that was toward 2003, 2004. Then I actually came back to Pittsburgh, where I now live and reside, my hometown, and did a couple years of activated time in the Pittsburgh as well. So I did 23 and a half years overall, some on active duty, some on recalled active duty after I'd entered a reserve status, and some as just an actual reservist training, but was not deployed again after 2006. So.
Boy, I'm excited to dive into your deployments and each of the cutters that you both were on and the jobs that you had on each one of these. We'll get to that as a part of our main story, because it really seems to me, in talking with the other branches and now talking with you both, is that it seems like you guys have you bounce around a lot. There seems to be a lot of variety if you go into the Coast Guard. But first, we're going to start with our phrase of the day, which being Coast Guard, we have to start with the word cutter, which I didn't know this is what we call a ship in the Coast Guard. I guess the term is used by the U.S. Coast Guard for its commissioned vessels, and they are 65 feet or greater in length. The term is English in origin and refers to a specific type of vessel, namely a small decked ship with one mast and bowsprit with a gaff mainsail and a boom, a square yard and topsail, and 2 jibs or a jib and a staysail. All of that is foreign to me. So I'm wondering if either of you could if you could translate that for me a little bit.
All right. So originally, the Coast Guard's founding service was a revenue cutter service. Which was, we were founded by the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. I heard there's a play about him now. It's really good. So for it to be a cutter, and you talk about the bowsprit and the jibs and the booms, the first 10 cutters that were commissioned were made to enforce tariffs. So we track our lineage from calling it a cutter all the way back to then. And then for anything 65 feet and lower, it's a small boat. It's just a boat. So that's where we make that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also said commissioned. So we have two kinds of commands on our cutters. We have ones that are commissioned that have an officer as the commanding officer. And then very unique to the Coast Guard is we have enlisted commands. So like the cutter that I'm on now, what all the other services would know as the commanding officer is actually an officer in charge, and he's an E8 or a senior chief. So we call those that they were placed in service because they have enlisted command, and then the ones that have a commissioned officer were commissioned cutters.
Okay. That definitely defines it better for me. Thank you for that. And I wanted to do a second one because, as we just learned, by just defining cutter, there's many different terms in the Coast Guard that we have to sort of translate a bit. But the next one I thought was really cool was forecastle, which is pronounced folksul, as opposed to what it looks like as forecastle. In the days of Columbus, ships were fitted with castle-like structures fore and aft. The structures have disappeared, but the term forecastle remains, refers to upper deck in forward part of ship. Have either of you seen one of these? Are they still part of cutters?
Go ahead, Mike.
I'll let you go, B, on one. That's yeah.
Okay.
You can give a little bit more.
Yeah. So the forecastle, what we call the forecastle now is almost synonymous with the bow. Mm-hmm. So anything up forward, it's where it's a watch station for when we're entering port or exiting port or doing anchoring evolutions. Mm-hmm. So you could say that forecastle would be synonymous with the bow.
Now, looking into our military headlines, I want to do something a little different for this episode. I'm focusing mainly on Coast Guard headlines as opposed to this large swath of military headlines that are out there. But two, I wanted to focus on specifically. Number one is this interesting fact that the Coast Guard station in Fort Lauderdale crew members recently released 200 sea turtles in November. Working with the Gumbo Limbo Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Center, the boat crew released green, loggerhead, and hawksbill sea turtles from multiple sea turtle hospitals along the Florida East Coast. Since the pandemic, we've had a hard time finding volunteers to assist us with sea turtle releases, says Whitney Crowder, the Sea Turtle Rehabilitation Coordinator with Gumbo Limbo Nature Center, but the Coast Guard hasn't said no yet. I thought this was a really interesting headline, and I think it relates back to you, Mike, in saying that you did a lot of environmental work whenever you first joined in '91.
Yeah.
But I found this interesting because I definitely did not know that the Coast Guard works in environmental work such as this.
So, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's very interesting because, like I said, I came in '91, and in '91, when I was working in around Norfolk and down in Portsmouth, and the Coast Guard had something out there. So a lot of the shipping industry along the Gulf and even the intercoastal waterway, the area between like the Carolinas and up to Maryland, obviously, you know, Chesapeake Bay, a lot of fishing. So, but the way they fish commercially is something called long lining, purse sending. Basically, when you fish in quantity, it can pull a lot of other things into your net that you weren't necessarily fishing for. So we had a program, these things called turtle exclusion devices, or TEDs, TEDs. So back in the early '90s, it was a big thing we were implementing to make sure all these commercial fishermen put these devices, which basically kept turtles out of their nets because they were decreasing the population of turtle nesting sites and the population of a bunch of indigenous turtles along the coast. So I haven't worked in that area for 15 years. I'm sure the devices still exist in the program to some degree, still exists, but it just shows that 24-ish years later, after I was involved in that program, there's still an environmental mission looking at similar stuff. So it just kind of goes to show that the Coast Guard mission, like the BM1 got at, goes back 230 some years. So the core missions of law enforcement, environmental regulation, anti-terrorism, you know, they morph into different specific little assignments, but they basically continue to address a lot of things that, you know, the country wants us to look out for. So.
Awesome. I want to dive more into that as we get into our main story. Our second headline is actually a little over a year old, but it was one of the biggest headlines to come out last year and probably helped put U.S. Coast Guard a little bit more into the, I'd say, the public knowledge sphere. But back in September 2019, the U.S. Coast Guard captured a 40-foot-long submarine carrying 12,000 pounds of cocaine worth more than $165 million in the Pacific Ocean. There are no words to describe the feeling Valiant crew is experiencing right now. Commander Matthew Waldron, the cutter's commanding officer, said in a prepared statement, in a 24-hour period, the crew both crossed the equator and intercepted a drug-laden, self-propelled, semi-submersible vessel. Each in and of themselves is momentous events in any cutterman's career. Taken together, however, it is truly remarkably unprecedented. This interdiction was an all-hands-on-deck evolution, and each crew member performed above and beyond the call of duty. I wanted to jump back to this headline because it was such an attention grabber, and it's so different than we helped release sea turtles. This is, we actually boarded a vessel and made arrests and stopped drug dealers. So in two separate headlines, we see a very large breadth of service for the Coast Guard. And I thought I'd open that up for a little bit of discussion here.
All right. So when I was on the Coast Guard cutter the Gare out of Portsmouth, Virginia, our mission was very similar to what the Coast Guard cutter Valiant did in this interdiction. So, you know, the headline remains, we found drugs, we caught the drugs, we brought the people on board, we, you know, through our legal system, we worked through that. That's you know, higher level. What a lot of people don't realize is the person that spotted that drug vessel was probably an E2 or an E3 6 months out of boot camp. You know, their watch station while underway is to be a lookout. So they've got their night vision goggles or their binoculars, and for 4 hours, twice a day, they're up on the bridge assisting the navigation team in, you know, performing that mission. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, you've got other rates or specialties or MOSs that are sitting in a room in front of a computer screen, in front of a radar, and they're you know, they're searching that way. And then you've got people working intelligence, and you know, they're trying to interpret everything. And then so all that to say, oh, and you also have an aviation detachment that whose primary mission while they're underway for those missions is to interdict the drug vessels as well. Mm-hmm. So all that to say, of a crew of 120 people on the 270, I'm not sure what the Valiant has as far as a crew complement. You've got every person, even the cooks, trying to do their meals around when the small boat crew's launching. I mean, it's an all hands on deck thing.
Yeah.
So
enormous operation. It
is. And you know, your world underway is the cutter. Mm-hmm. And the crew. And when something like this happens, the commander was right. It was an all hands thing. And it's great to see that all this work and the prep and all the stuff you don't see, and the people that don't make the headlines. You know, there was a guy that was banging on the sub, you know, that was great. I think they made a sticker out of him. But you know, all that to say, and he'll even tell you too, you know, everybody on that boat led up to him being able to do that.
And one thing I think that we're glossing over is the fact that they crossed the equator during this as well, which we talked about in our Navy episode. Was there's a lot of different traditions in the Navy of, like, if you cross maritimes, you cross time zones, you cross the equator, there's different traditions that you have to observe whenever you do this for the first time. So a lot of these guys might have been crossing the equator for the first time, and they get to commandeer a cocaine sub. I'm going to term that. That's a hashtag now, cocaine sub. So that must have been a really kind of like, they must have been stoked getting back to port.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm sure, you know, those are, you know, I'm not sure the length of their deployment, but I think it would be safe to assume, you know, 2 to 3 months of that year for them was that patrol. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely great coming back to home port. You've got your crossing the line ceremony done. You probably got a cool plaque done up. Mm-hmm. You've got all the port calls that you had, all the experiences you had with your shipmates, good and bad. Mm-hmm. So yeah, when those boats come home and the families are lining the pier, it's definitely a great feeling, you know, to see them.
Well, jumping into the main story, I mean, we've already started talking a lot about the Coast Guard here, but the main story being the Coast Guard, I guess I should go back and say that the Coast Guard actually doesn't fall under the Department of Defense. It instead falls under the Department of Homeland Security. And that's an important distinction, I think. And would either of you know why that is?
Well, so I'll just throw a comment on, and obviously the BM1 might want to add to it. But so as he said, we started out under the Department of the Treasury, you know, created by Alexander Hamilton to basically to ensure that a new nation's ability to conduct commerce was going to be, you know, preserved. So, you know, and just little short thing is a lot of the other side of the table at that point, if you will, you know, there were a lot of people that thought he was crazy investing that kind of time and money and focus. But, you know, he was smart enough to realize that in order for us to be a prosperous nation, we had to make nice with and trade with Europe, because you couldn't be an isolationist nation and make it back then. Mm-hmm. Obviously, started out under Alexander Hamilton, but then we moved in the 60s to the Department of Transportation, which, you know, in a lot of people's opinion, not just mine, wasn't probably necessarily a good move for our agency. But I mean, it went that way until the Department of, you know, Homeland Security was created after 9/11. So again, any organization around for 230 some years goes through a lot of changes, and we've survived and we've made the best with them. I honestly believe, and I'll let the BM1 comment on this because he's currently on active duty, and his mission and his people are being affected by it right now. And I'm interested to hear his take. But I think we're better positioned and in a better situation now, being under the Department of Homeland Security, as, and some other agencies might not agree, but very likely the preeminent agency in a 22 agency department, gives us a lot of profile and attention that we didn't previously get. And again, and I want to make it clear, not to pat myself, the BM1, or any of the other 38,000 men and women serving in the Coast Guard on the back. It's not about the attaboy aspect of it. It's about the funding so that we can upgrade our equipment and our resources to do the mission to the best of our abilities. That's why I say we needed the attention, because the money followed the attention. Mm-hmm. So, and the BM1, I'm sure, has some things, and his experiences current up to today, and I'd be interested to hear his take on that as well.
So, with us being in DHS and not DOD, something that does for us is our ability to conduct law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the Coast Guard lawyer, so I'm not going to go too heavy into it, but I know with us not being part of the Department of Defense, it gives us the ability to enforce laws and treaties outside of our 12 nautical mile realm of our territory. Mm-hmm. So with that, you know, we can circle that back to the Coast Guard Cutter Valiant. There's no telling how many nautical miles offshore they were, because of our unique position being in DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. We're able to do that mission away from our shores, even outside the 200-mile economic exclusionary zone, to where we're able to ensure safe navigation and, you know, the enforcement of treaties, like I said earlier. So that I think is the I don't know if you'd call it political or legal, but that is a huge benefit and why the Coast Guard is so unique.
Awesome. And I also want to make this a more personal discussion as well, as you know, we've looked at the core principles of each branch, as we've talked with each of our guests about their specific chosen branch of service. And the Coast Guard's core principles are listed as honor, respect, and devotion to duty. Mike, I want to start with you. Let's go back to 91. What made you want to join the Coast Guard? You obviously have had a very long career in the Coast Guard, so I'd be interested to hear how that changed over the course of your career and what you love about it.
So it's interesting. Everybody has their, you know, enlistment or joining story. I've come to find that in the Coast Guard, it's a little bit, maybe a lot of bit different. It's not always necessarily you know, your dad did it, your grandfather did it, 6 people in your family were a Marine. That can be, and there are definitely some legacy stories within a Coast Guard of families having 4 and 5 generations. So it does happen, but I've learned that it kind of tends to be 2 different stories. Either you grew up around water and were a swimmer, were a boater, were somebody that just lived around the coastal area, the ocean, whatnot, and you just had a love for it. You saw people getting saved, you saw people enjoying the water, and that's what kind of instilled the sense in you. The other side of it is probably somewhat 50-50, is people that they're all different stories. There's no real like core reason. It's like something happened and you ended up in the Coast Guard. And I don't mean that negatively. I think it really gives us a strength of diversity and wide-ranging backgrounds. But to my point, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and even today, a lot of people say, I didn't know there was Coast Guard in Pittsburgh. And I know the BM1 answers that all the time. And you know, I understand that it's landlocked, it's a river, it's not the coastal environment. But I was interested in the environmental area. I graduated from University of Pittsburgh, and at the time, we were just coming off the tragedy of the Exxon Valdez oil spill. And there was a lot of focus on environmental protection, and the Coast Guard actually developed and began some programs for people to enter under you know, some funding that was created. So I went in for that reason. But I'll tell you, it's funny when I went through the whole recruiting process and, you know, I finally decided to do it. You know, I do remember, and I always tell this story, I remember being at the recruiter and raising my right hand and getting ready to, you know, ship off to officer candidate school. And I remember looking down at this, it wasn't even a real one, it was a fake plant in the, and I just remember, like 24 years later, I remember like kind of the nervous excitement of, wow, I'm really doing this. Like I'm standing by the flag, just like the BM1 has in his background and you have in your background, and I'm raising my hand. But I'll tell you, honest to God, I don't mean this to fluff it up or to, you know, blow smoke type thing. Once I joined, I never looked back. I enjoyed my whole career. I mean, I never regretted the decision. I never thought I made a mistake. I never second guessed it. I never, in my worst, getting up at 5 in the morning with the garbage can and, you know, doing the push-ups and the running and your mattress getting thrown out the window and the whole thing. I never thought I really got myself into something I shouldn't have got myself into. And that never was part of my thinking.
And you had mentioned before we started recording that your time in the Coast Guard went through 9/11, and the mission of the Coast Guard changed a lot during that time. And you say you don't regret any of it. Did you feel that way as even the mission changed?
No, absolutely. And like I said, it's not like that I didn't have, you know, I don't want to make this the highlight of the talk, but it's not like I didn't make sacrifice or I didn't have, you know, monumental changes come upon my life and things that I would have, you know, not seen coming and had to adjust to. That's an absolute fact. But even with that, I don't have what you would call a regret. I think the Coast Guard gave me an opportunity and camaraderie and friendships and adventure. It gave me every bit as much as I gave it.
Was there a reason that you chose Coast Guard? You know, is that the environmental piece over the other branches?
I think that was it. I did, you know, like a lot of people. I mean, I considered, met with a Navy and an Air Force recruiter. I mean, there were some aspects of that appealed to me, but I think the smaller nature of it, and particularly, like you said at the time, the actual avenue of pursuing some environmental type stuff. And I did. I worked in the environmental field for 9 years, worked on oil spill cleanups and whatnot. But as soon as 9/11 happened, a lot of the core mission of the Coast Guard kind of pivoted over to port security and anti-terrorism. And I was right in that slug of people that had to get prepared, trained, and their mindset on that. This is what I'm doing for the good portion of the rest of my career if I'm staying. Mm-hmm. I did.
There's so much to dive into there. And Jacob, I want to ask you about why you served as well. But I also want to highlight something about the basic training here is that that seems like the basic training doesn't go light on you in the Coast Guard. It's just as intense as the other branches. Am I right?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough in my basic training company to have a couple former Marines. And so, you know, I think at first, you know, I was 25 when I went to basic training, and I think the 2 prior Marines were about my same age. Mm-hmm. So we kind of clicked right off, but talking to them a few weeks in, you know, when we could actually talk, I asked what was the difference, and they said physically, not much. There are stuff that the Marines have to do in their daily jobs that Coast Guard doesn't necessarily have to do. So maybe the training was a little different in that regard. However, the mental aspect of the Coast Guard basic training, they said, was a little different. There was a little more to be expected as far as the knowledge that you had to have, week 2, week 4, week 6, through the training in order to go on to the next phase. Mm-hmm. So if there was a huge difference, in their words, it would be the requisite knowledge as you go through.
Right. And so why did you choose the Coast Guard?
So I'm going to use Commander's path. He said he talked to the Navy, the Air Force, and then the Coast Guard. I did the exact same thing. I didn't know there was a recruiting office in Louisville, Kentucky when I was going through. So I started off with a Navy recruiter. I did pretty well on my ASVAB, and he was like, awesome, I'm going to make you a nuke. I was like, cool, what's that mean? And he said, we'll give you 50 grand, and then every 4 years you get $90,000 to re-up. I was like, man, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
What's a nuke do? And so he kind of explained it. So basically it's a nuclear, it's a machinist mate. And I'm paraphrasing here. I'm sorry to the Navy guys that are listening. But it's basically a guy that operates the nuclear plant on the subs or the nuclear powered ships. So I was like, okay, cool. I think I can tolerate anything for that amount of money. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was given private baseball lessons, and not 2 days after talking to the Navy recruiter, I noticed one of my kids' dads was wearing a Coast Guard warrant officer hat. And he's still a mentor to this day. His name's Dan Payne. I was like, hey, you're in the Coast Guard. That's awesome. I'm going to join the Navy. And he was like, oh, no, wait, please. So, and what that allowed me to do, all joking aside, was it allowed me to see other branches. And he was like, hey, go talk to Air Force, go talk to Army. And I'm going to have an appointment at the Coast Guard recruiting office, in a couple of days for you. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, cool. So I went and talked to the Coast Guard, and immediately the diversity that the Coast Guard offered, both in all of their different ratings, but specifically to my rating, being a boatswain's mate, we do so many different things. And I have such a tendency to get bored with what I'm doing, that the appeal of being able to, do ice breaking or do the aids to navigation mission or law enforcement or search and rescue or any number of those things, the environmental stuff like Commander was talking about, mm-hmm. That appeal to me was awesome. And I was at a point in my life, I was 25. I had worked, several jobs. I was doing okay. I had a wife and a kid. And after talking to Dan Payne and the recruiter, me and my wife just, we went for it with the Coast Guard. And like Commander said, we never looked back, and
right.
7 years later, I'm on my 5th duty station, and it's been a blast. It's been a blink, I'll tell you that. But it's been a blast.
Definitely. And it's interesting because, Mike, you had that service that kind of went through the 90s into the early 2000s. And Jacob, you're joining us after the 2010s. Jacob, how do you feel the service is currently as opposed to what Mike was going through in the 90s?
So I feel like now, just from talking to Mike and, talking to some of my mentors, that I think the service is aligning, and I think we've got a really good path forward. Our motto is Semper Paratus, always ready, and sometimes we change that to Semper Gumby, always flexible. So I think with the times and with the with the dynamics that we have going on right now, we're building new cutters. We're recapitalizing some stuff. We're getting more training for our ratings. So I think our Commandant's watchwords are ready, relevant, and responsive. Mm-hmm. And I think we're doing a great job on all three of those avenues right now.
You know, I'll share I had this pipe dream once after going down through the Caribbean, and I saw, you know, these beautiful sailboats that are out there doing tours and things, and I was like, this would be kind of awesome just to kind of work these ships down in the Caribbean and, you know, take people on tours or go, you know, fishing and things like that. But both of you coming from landlocked areas and then deciding to join the Coast Guard, Mike, you had mentioned that if you were on the coast, if you watched people swimming, if you wanted to be out on the boats and the ships, Coast Guard seemed like there was the big draw for that. But both you coming from those landlocked areas, you know, did you have a love for water to start, and that also helped your decision to join the Coast Guard?
In my case, honestly, not really. I mean, it's funny because every time, again, tongue-in-cheek comment, but probably really not real far, and probably, you know, revealing a little bit here. But, you know, when people meet you, again, because of the Ashton Kutcher movie and because of people's preconceptions, the first thing they'll say is, oh, you must be an excellent swimmer. Or, you know, if we were swimming, I know I'll be saved. And I'm like, I'm going to tell you what, dude, you know, I'm going to be able to save myself. And I did the life-saving training and I passed it all. I said, but it's a lot simpler in a pool, pulling a brick up from the bottom. I said, you expect me to save you? It better be my best day swimming, because I'm not 100% sure for that. And the thing is it's because, like the BM1 said, that's a real specific 1 out of 10,000 people are going to have the mindset and pass the training to do surfman or an actual, you know, be inserted in the Bering Sea and pull 3 fishermen out type thing. I mean, that's something we do and I have all the respect for it, but that was never going to be what I do. So it's kind of one of those things. Again, the diversity of missions, and I'm glad and as proud as you can be that that's something our service does, but it's not the reason I joined. And thank God there are a lot of other avenues for people that want to do different things to still be a part of the Coast Guard. So it gave me an opportunity beyond that. So,
Commander, I'll tell you how I answer that question. So my rate and my primary job is essentially a ship driver or a boat driver. You know, at the core, that's what I love, and that's what I'm expected to be proficient at. So what I tell people back home when they're like, "Oh, you know, you're Ashton Kutcher," no, I'm not. If the coxswain or the OD of the ship or the boat is in the water, we're all really
you got bigger problems,
day, you know. So
yeah, that's good.
This is one of those things that, like, Hollywood can add something, but usually people will see that and then get the wrong idea of like what the service is actually doing. Not everybody's running in slow motion everywhere, or things are blowing up and we're riding wave runners over ramps, you know. But Jacob, you shared a couple videos with me, and I'd like to play a little bit of them and have you both sort of walk me through. It seems very like day in the life in a way. We're going to start with a video of a ship here on the Ohio River. Is it? I could tell looking at the video and the angle to the city. I'm like, I think I know where that's at. But we want to start here with, this is the Osage, correct?
Yes.
I'm going to up the sound a bit because there's a kind of a rocket soundtrack to this.
All right. So what you're seeing there, that's our primary mission. So we're marking the channel. Up here, we're marking the 12-foot curve so that all the commercial guys know where the good water is. So the idea is if you keep it between the buoys, you'll be in good water.
Okay.
So
is there a difference between the green and the red?
Yeah. So the red side is going to be as you're going down river. So the current behind you, the red side is going to be on your left-hand side. Mm-hmm. And the green side is going to be on your right. So we call that the left descending bank and the right descending bank. So it's just what side of the river.
Is this you pounding this hammer?
No, that's definitely not me. If I was in this video, I'd be the guy driving. I don't get to have the fun on deck anymore. No, I try to get down there as much as I can, but So yeah, so these are, you know, the guy running the deck right now, he's probably an E4 or an E5, and he's got, you know, other E4s, E3s, E2s working the deck. And so right here, he's getting this piece of concrete essentially is the anchor for the buoy. So that's 1,500 pounds of concrete and 90 foot of chain, and that attaches to the buoy, and that's what keeps it in place.
Was he wasn't pulling that up by hand, was he? Because if he was, he's Superman. That kind of looked.
I should lie for him and say yes, but no. So over here to the right of the screen, there's it's called a capstan.
Here?
Yep, that's it right there.
Okay.
So there's a person just behind the three in the front, and he's working a hydraulic handle, and that's making that capstan spin to bring that chain on deck and that sinker on deck.
Now, do you guys clean these buoys? Is that part of it? Is it just making sure that the placement of them stays consistent as the river, you know, rises and lowers and things like that?
So if we're changing the buoy out, we're checking the chain, or we're checking the buoy. And typically, if we're going to check the buoy, it's because it's like riding low in the water and it's not giving the proper signal to the mariner. These things get hit all the time.
Which is kind of amazing. We're driving a boat. Who hits a buoy?
Well, so you would think that, and these all the riverboat pilots here, all my experience with them is they're just, I mean, it's amazing their skill set. But you know, when they've got 3 wide, 9 long, and they're coming down in fog and making passing arrangements with an upbound or a downbound vessel, our buoys become sacrificial, which is totally understandable.
And if you've ever visited Western PA, the fog here can get so thick that you can be across the river and not see the city, which is pretty insane. And you can tell from this video that there's a lot of snow here on the bank. So these guys, you kind of have to be prepared going into the Coast Guard that you're going to deal with some cold water.
Yeah, absolutely. And fortunately, we are able to provide the cold weather gear to make it more bearable, you know.
Did either of you ever do a polar bear plunge?
No.
I did not. I'm
really disappointed in you both. I think that should be a requirement if you're getting into the Coast Guard to do a polar bear plunge. I did that in Boy Scouts.
There you go, Jacob. There's an idea for a morale booster.
Yeah, right. So this is our primary mission here, and then Sean, you referenced the bank. So we also have lights along the riverbank, and so we have to service them and switch them out at certain intervals. But then we also have trees that grow up over them. So what you probably won't see in this video is we'll actually push the barge of the cutter up onto the riverbank. We'll put the brow over, you know, into the mud, and we'll just send 7 or 8 guys over with chainsaws to make sure that our lights are visible as the boats are navigating the river.
This is where I was like, okay, I think I know where we're at in the city. And this is on a smaller vessel.
Yep. So we've got 2 of these small boats on board. So what this probably could have been was the buoy broke its moorings and it went astray. So the small boat launched and went to recover it, and then they're just bringing it back to the cutter. As a small boat driver, that's probably one of the most fun things you get to do, you know, up here, just because, you know, you're going. The primary mission of, you know, ACE navigation is to mark the federally maintained waterways. But with that, you also have occasion to go outside of those well-marked waterways to conduct your mission. So there's a big risk assessment that goes into, you know, going outside of the marked channel and stuff like that. But it's fun. And sometimes the old man lets me off the bridge and I get to go on the small boat. But you know, that's
this might be a question that's this goes a bit too sort of big, but I'm thinking, as you talked about the laws under Department of Homeland Security and that you're allowed to work outside of that that 200 nautical limit, working in a landlocked area and on rivers, if there was a point where you guys had to police the rivers, is there a jurisdiction that you have to work with like the local Pittsburgh police, and the Coast Guard can cover like the rivers in certain aspects?
So Mike, I can speak a little bit to that. So under the arrangement and the organizational structure of the Coast Guard, so what I worked out was called the Marine Safety Unit, which basically there's two main positions that actually regulate the traffic on the river. And one of them is called Captain of the Port, the COTP. Captain of the Port basically means all the federal waterways laws and regulations are under the jurisdiction of that position. Also, the other one is OCMI, Officer in Charge of Marine Inspection. So all of the vessels that get inspection and come under federal regulation for things they have to have on board, regulations they have to follow, health and safety laws, they all come under the OCMI. So the Captain of the Port and the OCMI are two hats, if you will, two jurisdictional responsibilities held by the Coast Guard commander that is in charge of the MSU, or Marine Safety Unit, in Pittsburgh. So it's usually a Coast Guard commander, and sometimes he's promoted to a full captain position, but it's either one or the other. It's either an 05 commander or an 06 captain. But then we work with the Pittsburgh River Rescue, the Pittsburgh Police Department. So for some of the larger events like the Pittsburgh Fireworks Display, the Three Rivers Regatta, we have BM1's platform, the Osage, parked, docked, down near the river, and we run some, what they call patrol commander. We basically do some enforcement of some things along that area during the event. So it's basically, we coordinate all Coast Guard resources under all authorities for anything major. And even during normal things, if something happens with a mariner, or there's a boat that hits a bridge, or barges break away like the BM1 was getting at, we'll immediately interface with the Osage and let them know that happened. And depending on where they are out in their buoy ROM, or if they're in port, we'll enlist their support in that, operation if it's feasible. So, right. We're always in contact with each other, and we have different missions, but they work in conjunction with each other. So
awesome. I want to jump to the video now of St. Pete down in Florida. Okay, so jumping into the Vice here, this is a video from your time, Jacob, down in Florida.
So I think this was before my time, but same ship, same area.
Okay.
So the Vice is it's called an inland construction tender. So the crane's a little bigger, the barge is configured differently, and
I'll have you note also real quick that this one went with a little more pop music.
Nice.
So I don't know if there's a specific Coast Guard theme, but we've heard rock and we've heard pop. So
right.
So these guys are, they're welding and whatnot.
So this, similar to the structures on the river that we have on the banks, what he was welding there was a range structure. So basically, you've got a light in front and a light behind you, and if those two lights are in line, you're on track, and you're in the middle of the channel. The primary mission is basically that segment just before this, where they were pulling that pole out of the pin. So if you think of like a telephone pole on the water, or the fixed aids to navigation, that's the primary mission of the inland construction tenders. So they're putting these poles in the water. They're
pounding this? That's this here. Okay.
Basically, they're pulling this big, 40, 60 foot pile out of that pin, and then they're going to set it up, and they're going to drive it into the seabed, and they're going to put a light or a day board or both on it, and that's going to be the channel markers in all throughout like the intercoastal waterway, as the commander referenced before. So again, a federally maintained waterway that we're charged with marking. So same concept. Dive ops. So we recover our old structures that have fallen. What you're seeing right there was the pile driver. So that's the sleeve for the pile driver that drives the piles into the seabed there.
And these guys are all Coasties.
They're all Coasties. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of orchestration. He's talking to 3 different people right now. He's talking to the deck crew. He's talking to the person operating the crane, and he's talking to a person working another capstan about 65 feet away. So, I mean, it really is a dance trying to pull these big piles out of their racks and get them in position. The standard position for these is within 3 yards of their assigned position. So, you know, you've got a 75-foot tug and a 99-foot barge that was built in 1962, and you got to get it within 3 yards of, you know, the assigned position that's on the chart. So it's a lot of ship driving. It's a lot of coordination as well.
And this also looks
I
like
think
it's on
another thing that just to follow up on what the BM1 said, and he won't say it out of modesty and whatnot, but honestly, the thing that's undersold, like we said, you know, you see Ashton Kutcher and you see all the fun part of it, but you look at the 7 people in just a few seconds back in that frame, and BM1 appropriately so called it an orchestration or a dance, but you're dealing with like 1,000-pound up to multiple ton objects, and you're hand rigging them, you're maneuvering them. I mean, you know, it's like the risk involved and the safety training and the awareness to do these jobs, even at the entry level position, really can't go unnoticed, because these men and women are really taking on a lot of risk and putting up with a lot of, you know, tough conditions to even just get to the point of doing their job. And again, not to pat people on the back, but just to give proper recognition where it's due. I mean, in those conditions, just basically get there and start your day is something a lot of people wouldn't take on. So,
and this looks like it's all on really calm water. Would you be doing this in surf, like in rough waters as well?
So we've got built-in limitations to our weather that we can conduct in. So anything, you know, great, like if we were trying to build in even that sea state there that you saw right before the hammer, that would be kind of rough, because we're essentially we're anchored, but they're called spuds. So they're the big poles on the side of the barge that you see there, and they make contact with the seabed, and we're there. But the barge still goes up and down on those pretty freely. So I'll do a plug for the safety of our guys. If you're ever on a small boat and you think that this really big, you know, Coast Guard cutter or tugboat won't be affected by your wake, you're severely mistaken. So just think, you know, you've got 7 guys under a huge swing and load, and Joe Boater is in a hurry to get to his next marina, and he sees this big Coast Guard ship. Well, his wake affects you a lot. And so it's a dance with weather. It's a dance with the guys up on the bridge making the call outs, or, you know, employing other government agencies or other Coast Guard units to set a security zone sometimes in like the high traffic areas. So there's a lot that goes into it.
There's so much about the Coast Guard. It is quickly now becoming my favorite branch. Don't tell anybody else I said that. But I don't know, Mike, do you have any scuttlebutt for us for our scuttlebutt round?
So, you know, I mean, just because I'm not on active duty anymore, I'll tell you what I would say as far as just kind of like in the news lately, common stuff, you know, something that's probably, so there was that recent well-publicized rescue of the gentleman that was out, was rescued by a commercial banana boat, a commercial freighter. And one of the things that, I know that this really falls under scuttlebutt, but I kind of wanted to get it in, again, along the lines of what BM1 just mentioned with safety. It always amazes me. So I guess I'll use this platform as a way, you know, 6 years after retirement to get this message out. If you're a boater, you know, invest in the small amount of money in the necessary equipment to be a responsible boater.
Hmm.
All your life vests and you know, have a signaling device, have a decent quality marine band radio on board and know how to use it and do some tests of it and know who and when to signal and what kind of radio protocol to the most basic level. A float plan, you know, let somebody know that you're going out, where you're going, when you're due back. So somebody knows when you're overdue, so you don't get hours and days beyond where you should have been. The smaller the margin of error, the more likelihood you're going to get found. So like that, again, that case in the news recently, doesn't seem like he did too much very wrong, and he did have some equipment that wasn't accessible based on, you know, what happened to him. But just wanted to put into plug. And the other thing is too, just from a standpoint of sensibility, just because you can do it doesn't mean you always should. Should you go out 6 miles on Lake Erie in a 15-foot Boston whaler? I wouldn't do it. I mean, because, you know, storms on the lake can come up really quick, and you're probably going to get caught somewhere you didn't need to be. So not to be too public safety oriented, but it's just one of those things that, you know, help us by being smart and responsible in your boating. And I think that goes a long way. So
awesome. Jacob, any scuttlebutt for us?
Yeah. So one of our cutters on the lakes, and Commander will, I'm sure, appreciate this from his time up there. The Coast Guard cutter Mackinac. I'm not too up on the history of why we started doing this. But some years ago, we got into the business of delivering Christmas trees on the lakes. So I think it was last week, the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac loaded their forecastle to bring it full circle, loaded their forecastle full of Christmas trees and delivered them to a community up there. So I'm sure if you just did a quick Google search on the cutter Mackinac and comma Christmas tree, you'll probably pull up some good stuff on it.
That's
awesome. Interesting.
That's a good one for the holidays. I have one that comes to us from Greenland. The U.S. Coast Guard seaman Caitlin Kilroy, while dining in a restaurant during her port visit in Greenland's capital, she kind of took pity on a man eating alone and decided to cover the cost of his dinner. Well, her action set off a chain of events that would result in an international exchange of goodwill, as the person that she bought the dinner for was actually the premier of Greenland, Kim Kielsen. The premier was so pleased by this that he asked to come take a tour of Kilroy's cutter, the Campbell, and Campbell's commander, Captain Thomas Crane, embraced the opportunity, welcomed Premier Kielsen on board. He also accepted a personal tour of, I believe it's pronounced Nuuk, N-U-U-K, in Greenland. But Kilroy has been in the Coast Guard for nearly 2 years, enlisting in 2018, and as a non-rate described as having an affable disposition and knack for reaching people. She slipped naturally into a public affairs role, supplementing the work of the PAOs at Coast Guard Base Portsmouth, Virginia, for much of her career. Her performance during the 85-day mission, documenting events and photographing Coasties at work, as well as the chance encounter at dinner, earned her the Coast Guard Achievement Medal, which I thought was just a cool thing that, you know, just a happenstance. But I did notice that two terms in here kind of caught my ear, and I wanted to ask you both about it. This, in the article, it stated that she was a non-rate. And what is a non-rate?
So unlike other services, when you enlist in the Coast Guard and you go to basic training, unless there's an initiative for you to go directly to your we call them A schools. Other people call them MOS schools or their tech schools. Mm-hmm. You actually go to the fleet as an undesignated E2 or E3. So when I was saying that the person on lookout on the Valiant, you know, had been there for probably 2 or 3 months, they were a non-rate. Mm-hmm. So you spend time in the fleet, and it gives you an opportunity to see what kind of job that you want to do, and then you become eligible to put your name on the list to go to A school, and that's how you become an E4 or a petty officer. So okay. She was, you know, a very, very junior member of that crew doing that.
And also it said the work of the PAOs at the Coast Guard. What is a PAO?
Yeah, so the PAO is a public affairs officer. Okay. I think the older term used to be PIO, Public Information Officer, and that actually might be flip-flop. I think they might use both, but they're basically the same interchangeable meaning. But it's just the person that's in charge of public outreach, media outreach, messaging, more or less communications person at the unit that's, is designated as the person that's kind of authorized and trained, I guess, as much as anything, to provide outreach to media. And if there's a big event and there's media inquiry, that's the person that answers those inquiries.
There is so many different job opportunities in the Coast Guard. I kind of wish I was 20 years old again. But I kind of want to finish also on this video that I spoke of. I'm going to pull this up and we're going to play this out at the end. And hopefully you both can give me some color commentary. This seems a little imposing to start, is the deck guns, but they are in the Gulf. So I'm sure that there's a certain element of protection that you need. But it's about 2 minutes here. And I find the video to be really interesting. I'm interested to hear both your thoughts afterwards. You know what I found most interesting about that is if it did not make any mention of Coast Guard in there, I would have assumed Navy or Marines. Yeah. But yeah. And I think we've decided that heavy metal might be the theme music for the Coast Guard.
All around.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us, and thank the audience for joining us. We are definitely going to be doing a Space Force program. That's going to be the one that finalizes our run through all of the branches, as it is the most recent. But I'd like to invite you both to come onto our Veterans Breakfast Club programming. Happens every Monday night, Wednesday mornings, and we do a Greatest Generation live on Sundays. But we'd love to have you on there to talk more about your service and meet the other veterans within our network. I think it's such an important opportunity now, especially during COVID, that we all stay connected. Thank you so much for your service, and thank you, Jacob, for helping keep the waterways in Pittsburgh safe. Thank you, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for the opportunity, and thank Breakfast Club as well. And, BM1, good luck, man. It sounds like you have a great handle on things there and your job and your responsibility. So I wish you continued good luck. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of it today.
Thank you, Commander. Sean, thanks as well. And if there's any help or any support that we can provide, please be sure to let us know, okay?
Definitely. I love that we're in connection with all of the recruiting offices and the service stations throughout Pittsburgh. We love connecting with everyone. So thank you again, and hope to talk to you guys soon.